Welcome to the second episode of Understanding Woburn's Community Preservation Act. I'm Emily Block and this is June McKenzie. Last week, Carol and I went through the ins and outs of how CPA works, how the money is gathered, what is required of the communities to pass it, why it's on the ballot, the logistics of the Community Preservation Act, or CPA. This time, we're going to look into what kind of projects other communities have achieved through the CPA, how much it's cost them, what they've been able to accomplish, and what some of the possibilities for Woburn might be. June?
Okay, well, I'm going to start with a brief history of Woburn. Woburn was first visited by Europeans in 1621 and in 1640, when settlers from Charlestown were granted permission from the Massachusetts Bay Colony to expand. After much deliberation, the area we now know as Woburn Center was chosen for the new Charlestown village. Originally, the village included present-day Winchester and Burlington and parts of Stoneham and Wilmington. The new village grew quickly. By the fall of 1642, the town of Woburn was incorporated. In 1661, the Baldwin Mansion, still standing, was built. The 1700s saw many developments. Schools and taverns opened. A library was founded. Woburn played its part in the Revolutionary War. George Washington visited the Black Horse Tavern in South Woburn, now Winchester. Two good friends, Loamy Baldwin, the apple is named for him, and Benjamin Thompson, took opposite sides in the Revolution. Baldwin a patriot and Thompson a loyalist. Although Thompson, now known as Count Rumford, was on the wrong side of history and was run out of town, eventually fleeing to Germany, he is still admired for his many inventions. The drip coffee maker, the kitchen stove, and baking powder among them. Franklin Roosevelt once said that the three greatest minds America ever produced were Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, and Woburn's own Benjamin Thompson. In the 1800s, Woburn continued to grow. The opening of the Middlesex Canal in 1803 brought great economic and social boons to the town. One of the first civil engineering projects of its type in the United States, and employing a number of innovations, it provided the means to bring materials needed to make Woburn a center of the tanning industry. The canal also had passenger boats that brought people to Horn Pond to escape the heat of the city for recreation at our beautiful pond. The canal was the best way to get around until the railroads were built in the mid-century. In 1839, the same year that Mr. Goodyear vulcanized rubber at his home on Montvale Ave and revolutionized the production of tires, shoe soles, gaskets, and the many applications for use of rubber today, by the 1860s, Woburn was a center for the production of boots and shoes. The beautiful Woburn Public Library, a gift from Charles Bower Wynne and designed by H.H. Richardson, was opened in 1879. In 1888, Woburn was incorporated as a city. As the 1900s began, the Choate Memorial Hospital opened and a new high school was built. Horn Pond was busy with ice cutting in winters and recreation in summers. Route 128 opened in 1951, and in 1960, the Woburn section of Route 93 opened, making Woburn the crossroads of two great roads and making possible the wide commercial and industrial center we see today. So in conclusion, Woburn's history is rich and diverse, and citizens of Woburn are proud of their community, and we are looking to the future. Thanks.
And so now we're going to talk about what that future could look like if we vote in CPA. And for that, we were looking at some of the examples of towns near us, towns that were like us, towns that are not quite like us, but just to give an idea of what some of the projects could be. And also, very important to see how, once you start working on these housing or whatever it is, you become eligible for all kinds of grants, state grants, federal grants, and I'm going to give you an example of just how much that can be. So Lexington, one of our closest neighbors, has had it since 2006, and they have worked on about 114 projects. And one of them is extremely notable for us. In 2009, they restored an old factory and repurposed it. It is now a 15-unit residential housing for brain-injured adults. And part of it is rent subsidized, so it fits into the affordable housing and certainly meets a community need. The CPA invested $300,000. The entire cost, however, was over $6 million. So where did that money come from? Federal monies, state monies, local monies, and they have a beautiful, award-winning, and entirely livable environment for some brain-injured adults. It's even connected with a walkway, a wheelchair ramp so that people who live there can get into the center of town.
That's great.
Yeah.
Shows you what money can, a little bit of CPA money can
Yeah,
do.
as a seed money.
Right, right.
Right. Do you want me to go on, or do you want to start?
Well, that reminds me that nonprofits can benefit from the CPA. I know that in Gloucester, there's a program for disadvantaged women called Wellspring, which had a building that was deteriorated, and they were actually able to replace their windows with CPA money, which was fantastic.
Yep. And didn't cost the town anything then?
I don't believe so. I think CPA paid for the whole thing.
Yeah, that's great. So, by the way, all of these projects we're talking about, if you remember from last episode, or if you missed last episode, we are paying into it now. Every time there's a real estate transaction, that money is going into the state fund. And that money is going out to places like Lexington, like Gloucester, and Tewksbury, which brings us to the next one. Tewksbury has had it, I can't remember when they opened it, but I think 2006. And Tewksbury is kind of a community like us, I would say. Same kind of income, yeah. And they did a long pond restoration and fixing up their pond area for conservation, for passive recreation, you know, people walking, not ballparks or anything like that. And they were able to put $120,000 in from CPA. The city or town, their town, gave $30,000, and they got $225,000 from the Clean Water Act.
Wow, that's
as
fantastic.
A straight-out grant. And you know, Horn Pond, we all love Horn Pond, and Horn Pond's in great shape, but wouldn't it be wonderful to have extra conservation put in there? So we could have cleanup crews cleaning up the garbage or things like that.
That would be fantastic.
Yep.
I've talked extensively with members of the people who are involved in bringing the CPA to Gloucester, which has some similarities to Woburn in that they went for CPA 3 times before they won. This is our 3rd effort. They pointed me to a project in Rockport. There was an elderly housing complex that was privately run, and it had a 20-year tax credit, which was about to expire, which meant that it was going to go market rate if nothing happened. CPA invested, I think I'm not sure of the exact figure, but they invested in that project, and it is now permanently affordable. So it's affordable forever. The residents there never have to worry about their rents going to market rate, which was, I thought, a wonderful use of CPA money.
Yeah, for seniors who are, you know, we know they're on fixed income, they want to be able to plan, so that's great. And that reminds me, believe it or not, we didn't actually plan it exactly like this, but I didn't know this before, but CPA can actually loan to private developers. And I found that out because in Weymouth they did something where they had like 60 units, and they were all above market or at market or above market. And they wanted to be, the guy wanted to fix them up, or someone wanted to fix them up. So someone, the CPA lent the private owner money with the stipulation that 3/4 of the units be affordable.
Wow,
and
that's great.
permanently affordable. And once again, CPA put in 150,000. The town had to put in 100,000. And you'll never guess how much the state had to put in, or how much the state granted them.
I bet it was quite a bit.
Almost 11 million.
Wow, that's
Almost
fantastic.
11 million. And on top of that, with state tax credits and this thing called the CIPF, which is Capital Improvement Preservation Fund, another 6 million.
That's fantastic. And these were apartments that needed renovation?
Yes. Yep.
Wow.
And
wow.
they were not affordable units before. And of course, we all know it's a state law that you have to have 10% affordable units, and Woburn has how many?
In order to avoid 40B.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we're below that. We may be about 7%. I'm not absolutely.
Yeah, I
I'm
don't
not
know
sure,
what it is.
but the CPA could definitely help us achieve that goal.
And we are, in a future episode, going to have some people on who can actually explain what 40B is and how it works and its relationship to CPA. But neither of us really know. So we leave that to the experts.
Pretty technical.
Yeah. Do you want to do anything else?
Well, I can mention that Somerville, which recently passed the CPA, is devoting a very large percentage of their CPA money to affordable housing. They came out with, they recently appropriated large sums of money. They haven't decided how to spend their housing money yet, but they're covering a wide range of historic preservation, open space, and recreation funding projects with their new CPA funds, which they've just come into.
Yeah, and that brings up another really good point, which is, once again, the CPA is managed by the community.
Right, exactly.
So if you have a need for historical preservation, that's what you spend the money on. In Quincy, for example, they really needed open space. And so they have done, I don't know what the percentage is, but vast majority of their money has gone into open space. And Quincy already has a 10% affordable housing.
Do they?
So they don't really need to develop that much of it. And they can still invest in some for improvements and things like that, but they don't need to focus on it.
Right, and your point is that the state is not telling us how to spend
No,
the money.
absolutely not,
with
except
the
for those
community.
10%. 10% has
Right,
to go
right,
to each of the
exactly.
categories, but
Right.
that leaves 70% for the communities to
Right.
decide.
I know Cambridge devotes 70% of their funds to affordable housing.
Because
That's
they need
what
it.
they've decided to do, right?
Because that's what they need,
well,
right?
their real estate costs are so high.
Right.
Housing costs are so high.
But Cambridge also is really forward-thinking because they developed that trolley park. It was an old trolley graveyard, basically. And they developed it into a totally mixed use. It's not only mixed income, so there's 40 units, some of which are affordable housing forever. Some of them are rented, some of them are owned, retail space, and an underground garage, and a park.
That's great.
So-
That's fantastic.
And the railway tracks that led into the trolley park have been converted into a walking trail.
So it'd be very interesting to see how Woburn might be able to
Yeah.
plan a similar project.
Well, I would think like the Middlesex Canal,
Uh-huh.
we could do something with that, which has been, proposed for how many decades
Right.
to
and
do something with.
I've taken guided walks along the Middlesex Canal, and it's not developed at all. It's full of weeds. There's plenty of potential there
Yeah.
for really exciting attraction, which will bring people into our community
Yeah.
and attract paying customers to the town.
Yep, to the good restaurants,
Right.
which is what happens in communities. I mean, if you look at anecdotal evidence from people who have had revitalization from CPA, and they say, oh, we've been able to open new businesses, new restaurants, not just from people coming in from outside, but for their own residents who say, oh, downtown's now a nice place to
Right,
walk
right.
around.
Right.
So,
I know in Gloucester, the Chamber of Commerce enthusiastically supported the CPA, as did the mayor there. And I know we don't have a Chamber of Commerce, but they see it as a win-win.
yeah, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, in several communities, the business community has seen the potential.
Right, right.
Yeah,
And endorse the CPA.
yeah. Another thing about Quincy, which was interesting, is that they also failed either once or twice to get it on the ballot. And one of the reasons they failed is because it was spearheaded by a conservation group who wanted open space, and everyone said, there is no open space left in Quincy, so why bother? Well, it passed, and guess what? There was open space.
They found some.
They found some, and they developed it, and they're doing all sorts of things that are revitalizing neighborhoods, revitalizing, you know, they have a coastline.
That's right, they're on the ocean.
Yeah, or harbor. And, you know, it's things that people just didn't even expect.
Right.
You know, and I was thinking about Shannon Farm, because that,
Right.
I mean, that's kind of the last big open space that we know about, but there's probably lots of little hidden things that we don't really think about.
Exactly.
As
I mean,
open space.
what I've heard over and over again when I've talked to other communities is that projects are done that would never be able to be done because cities have, you know, a property tax has to cover schools, it has to cover basic services, and there usually isn't much money left over. So this is where CPA comes in. It can cover those projects that really enhance the quality of life for everybody, but that the community just can't afford to do.
Exactly. Exactly. But I want to go back to Shannon Farm just for one
Sure.
second, because it's not necessarily a lost thing at this point, because if CPA passes, it can be bonded immediately before CPA actually goes into effect. So that's something that could be worked on immediately.
Wow, that's very, very interesting
Yeah.
to know.
Yeah. So November comes around, we might be able to have some immediate action.
That's right, even though funds don't start to be collected till the
Exactly.
next fiscal year and they don't get paid out till the next. There's certain things you can do right away with CPA
Right.
funds.
And there would be so many. I mean, I don't want to go into all of it now, but with this kind of open space acquisition and development, there's so many grants available. Federal grants, state grants, conservation grants. And actually, we'll be having someone on in a couple weeks who will be discussing those kinds of things and those kinds of grants that are available and
Right.
what some of the options are.
So let's let Woburn take advantage of
Yeah.
those funds that everyone else has been taking advantage of
Yep.
for over 10 years now.
And that we've been helping to pay for.
Right, exactly.
And one of the other sort of interesting ones that I found, there's so many. Before I go on, I did want to invite everybody who's interested, whether you are for it or against it, to go on to the coalition site, which is the Community Preservation Coalition. It's communitypreservation.org. And go on to that site and just go through it. Look at what some of the projects have been. Look at what communities have invested their money in. See how much has been added to what they've been able to invest, not just through the state funds, but through grants. And go through, you know, where your aunt lives and see if her town has it and what they've done with it. Their website is very, very helpful, and
Very
it's
easy to navigate.
easy to navigate and full of information. So if you're confused about what some of the facts are, about not just how it works, but what it can be used for, you can check it out.
And should we talk about our website?
Yeah.
And our email?
Yep.
WoburnPreservation.org. And you can email us questions if you have questions about the CPA. We also have a Facebook page, Woburn Preservation. If we don't have the answers, we'll get them for you.
Yeah. And our email is woburnpreservationact@gmail.com, which we will show at the end of the show. So don't rush to write it down right now. But you can definitely come up with some projects. And we were trying to think of some of the projects besides the ones we've mentioned already. It can be used for, we have these wonderful old cemeteries in Woburn that are in such a state of disrepair.
Right.
And CPA is designed for things like that.
Definitely.
So not just, you know, fixing some of the headstones, but putting up a fence. That's part of it. Those funds can be covered.
We've mentioned the library. Recreation areas are always something that's needed.
Yeah. Playgrounds and things like that.
Playgrounds,
Yeah.
right, always need work.
Yeah. And some of the other places, like Thompson Library, there's not much doing with it.
A lot of people may not even know it's there.
Yeah, Thompson Library. It's a beautiful little building.
is.
on Elm Street, and it's not really used for anything at all. And
Right, very
it would be
little.
lovely to,
Restore it and have it as a community center.
or a museum,
Meeting place,
or
right.
a museum of Woburn's history.
Right now, there's a museum on the third floor of the library, but almost no one ever really gets to see it
Yeah.
because you have to go on a tour. It's not really safe to climb up there,
No.
so
Right, not accessible to the
not very
public.
accessible, right?
And some of the
exactly.
things that are up there are remarkable.
They're amazing.
Yeah.
They really are.
So I recommend you all call the library and ask for a tour because it is available if you want to. But wouldn't it be nice to go into a place where you can walk around for yourself and look at the things?
Exactly.
Yeah. And some of the other places here are like Cranberry Bog.
Shaker Glen,
Yep.
Rag Rock.
Yep.
Always.
Battle Road.
We have volunteers keeping them up, but it would be great to have CPA money able to be kicked in
Yeah.
to maintain them and preserve them.
Yeah. And you did mention the library, but we know that's a big expense, and if CPA can do that, and again, I think one of the most important things for CPA there is that once that money from CPA goes in, it becomes eligible for all these other things.
Right, right.
And
Opens up all kinds of
State
opportunities.
tax credits and all kinds of historic preservation
Exactly.
credits. The Count Rumford House.
Absolutely.
It's maintained, but it has limited hours, and possibly you could invest in that too. All kinds of things. The Armory. Nothing is really happening with that.
Right, right. There is a plan, but I haven't seen
I
anything
mean,
started
there's a
there yet.
developer
Right.
signed up for it, but if nothing happens with it, and we have CPA could actually come in, make an offer to that developer,
Or work with the developer.
or work with the developer
Right,
to
right.
create something that meets the criteria of CPA and the needs of the community,
That's supposed to be a mixed-use project, office space and residential.
which CPA could help pay for.
Exactly.
Yeah. And which we could all benefit from. So, can't really think of anything else right now. When we started talking about what we were going to talk about today, we thought we'd better do a little research into what other people who live in Woburn have been saying about Woburn. And we went. We were very happily surprised to see at our lovely library a wonderful collection of books about Woburn written by Woburnites. And actually, I want to end on a note. I want to read from a wonderful book, Woburn, A Past Observed, by the late John McElhaney. It's a wonderful history. If you haven't read it, I definitely recommend it. And our public library has a copy. And in it, in the chapter entitled An Old Treasure Saved and a Tribute to the Past, he writes about the Baldwin Mansion being saved and being moved, and I think a lot of you are familiar with that story. And in that, after he talks about it, he says, "It can only be humbly hoped that this history of Woburn has, perhaps in some small measure, accomplished the same thing. The goal was to take us back in time, to observe the past, and perhaps, in so doing, to provide some very real connections to the present. We are, after all, the product of our past, with where we live and how we live affected in large part still by those who have gone before us, and by the decisions they made. We journey back to Woburn's past, therefore, so as to hopefully better understand Woburn's present, and ultimately to better affect Woburn's future. Here's to all the old name Woburn families, conservative in their principles and not always the quickest to embrace differences and change. They were nevertheless committed to the noble concept of public service and deeply loyal to the town of their forebears. And here's to those who brought those differences and that change from across the ocean. Here, indeed, is to all those who have played a part in Woburn's past, named or unnamed, native or foreigner. May their triumphs and their failures and their joys and their sorrows be forever remembered by present and future generations, and may that remembrance of the past always lead us to a brighter future." Wise words indeed. Thank you very much, and I hope you'll join us again for our next episode. Thank you. Anybody wants one of these wonderful new bumper stickers, they're free. That's right, free. Just send us an email or give us a call and we will hand deliver it. And another thing we are happy to announce, on our website, we now have PayPal. So if you're shy about donating, this is a really good way to do it. Thank you.